Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Islam in Life with me, Raza Kazim. The Quran is the holy book of Islam that is used by Muslims as a way of guiding them in the issues that are regularly faced in the modern era. Can a book that is over 1400 years old really have any relevance today? In what way are the messages in the Quran relevant to the modern era? Apart from the moral guidance, one is often encouraged to consider the scientific facts that couldn't have been known 1400 years ago.
Science today in modern life holds a lofty position. The knowledge derived through science is considered absolute and superior to any other source of knowledge. Yet, whatever knowledge that has come to us in the modern time today has existed in the Holy Quran for centuries now. In fact, there is no human work in existence that contains statements as far beyond the level of knowledge of its time as the Quran. In Islam, religion and science have always been considered as twin sisters. Whereas the Holy Quran is used to draw and understand the scientific data contained therein, science is also used in modern times for the better understanding of the Quranic text. And while there's every attempt to use science to discredit religious belief, it is precisely the discoveries of science that, in an objective examination of the Islamic scripture, have highlighted the supernatural nature of revelation and the authenticity of the religion which it taught.
We're honored to be joined by our esteemed guest, Professor Tariq Ramadan, to discuss all of these issues. Welcome to the program, Professor.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam. I want to, before we go to the scientific facts that the clip talks about, I want to actually start off by asking you, what is the relevance of using a book for moral guidance that is over 1400 years old? Can it really provide that guidance?
Yes, of course. For the Muslims and the way we are looking at the revelation is, as you said, it's the moral guidance. It's essential here. It's the book is revealed to say three things that are essential. First is to remind us of the very presence of God, which is Tawheed, which is the oneness of God and His presence. So it's a revelation coming from Him, Ar-Rahman, Allama al-Quran, the most merciful, He taught the Quran. So it's this connection with Him. The second is really for us to get the understanding that because He is here, this life has a meaning. So our life has a meaning, the creation has a meaning, everything has a meaning around us, and we belong to Him and we go back to Him. So it's after acknowledging His presence, understanding that this means that our life has a meaning. Third, which has to do with now that life has a meaning, that there is one God and He's present in beyond space and time and within our history. How do we behave? How do we act? How do we deal with the universe? And this is the moral guidance. So wherever you are, and if you lived centuries ago as well as now, it's always the same moral questions. How do we choose the good? How do we avoid the bad? In which way we have to behave? So this is for us essential. But it's not only this. It's also connected, the moral dimension is always connected to the level of knowledge that you have. It's not, out of ignorance. So the more you are knowledgeable about sciences, about the universe, about yourself, the moral guidance is going to play a role in the way you deal with your knowledge. So morality and knowledge comes together, as it was said in the clip. It's the better you know, the better you believe. And you have to find a way. And this is why, even though the text is coming to us, there is a critical role to be played by your intellect. The way you read the text and the way you deal with your knowledge in order to connect what I know with the good way of dealing with what I know. And this is why the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, Allahumma nas'aluka ilman nafi'a. Oh God, we are asking you useful knowledge. Morally useful, but knowledge that is helping us to be better human beings.
One of the things that you talked about is the idea that the text is coming to us. The text is set in the narrative of 1400 years ago and the realities of 1400 years ago. And you're talking about interpretation. So isn't there a problem with interpreting the realities of yesteryear to the current day?
Yes, it could be, and this is exactly what we have now. Look at what is happening within the Muslim majority countries or among Muslims within Muslim communities, is that we have different interpretations. Some of our brothers and sisters, they are looking at the text and they are reading it literally. So we read the Quran and they are confusing the fact that these are the very words of God coming in a specific period of time. So they are looking at the word and say, we have to understand them as they were, and no interpretation, and there is no room for interpretation, which is one trend. There are others, and this is something which is essential. It's the mainstream Islamic understanding in the Shia tradition and the Sunni tradition, saying, no, the text, these are the very words of God, but we need to look at when they were revealed, to whom they were revealed, and not to stick to the formal dimension of the text, but the substance, the principles, and to understand that the models of that time are not our models today, but the principles could be the same. So, for example, and this is something that we find in all the philosophies, but we have it very much in the very old Islamic tradition and the Islamic sciences, is the principles, or for example, the principle of justice is going to be the same as we have now. Now, the way it's going to be translated into a specific history, you need to get a sense of how the Arabs were living, how the tribes were working, and in a way it was implemented. For example, Shura is this consultation between people. It's a principle. Now it was translated in that time depending and relating to a specific environment. So you keep the principle and you disconnect the principle from the specific historical model. Some of our brothers and sisters are confusing this, and they want exactly the same model and they want to implement it now. So for example, we had in Afghanistan people coming on, they were in charge, they said, we don't want tables, because there were no table at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him. They don't get the principle. The principle is around, we speak, but it could be around the table. The problem is not the model. The problem is keep the principles and find your own models for the time you are living. So this is where it's very critical to get this very deep understanding. There is no text if there is no intellect to read it and to try to understand the text beyond history, to extract the principles and to find our own models today.
You gave one example of people getting around and discussing things in the context of Afghanistan, for example, and that becoming an issue. I mean, that seems to be relatively simple, and maybe it isn't. I don't know what their thinking was. But are there other examples where perhaps the situation is more complex? What lessons can be derived from the Quran for modern life?
In every field. In every field. I took this example, but we can take, for example, the principle. There is one principle of Amruhum Shura Bainahum. Muslims, their characteristic is they come and they discuss together about their affairs and the political affairs or the social affairs. So the principle should remain. Whatever is the time and the space, you need to keep the principle. Now, how are you going to translate this? You're going to translate this taking into account in a specific society the collective psychology, the culture of the society, how things could be done, and even the level of scientific knowledge in that time. For example, if you go for elections, are you going to implement the way the people were consulted at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, today, while you have all this technology that can do the job better? So this is a problem. And for example, when it comes to when the months of Ramadan is starting, people are very literalist. We have to see it with our eyes. Okay, that's fine, but now we have a technology helping us to get it at the very time where it's happening, Al-Hilal is happening, that you can get this. Are we going to use the scientific knowledge to get a better understanding of how we can use the knowledge? The principle of Al-Hilal is there, that the moon and the sun and the way things should be decided. But we have technology that are helping us to be more precise. The problem that we have with some interpretations is that there is this confusion. So it comes here. We are talking about politics. We are talking about, for example, using technology for our decision. In fact, if you look at the golden age of Islam, the scholars were trying to get a better understanding of the world. In fact, for example, to get a better understanding of when do we have to pray, for example, Dhuhr and Asr. So when the shade of an object is the double of the object itself. So they were looking at astronomy to get the right. So in fact, in order to be a better practicing Muslim, you need to deepen your knowledge. So this is what we need to understand. These are very in many fields. We can see when it comes now to economy, we'll see exactly the same. When it comes to society, we'll see the same. So the problem for us is, as I said, faithful to the principles means creative minds as to the models. That's essential.
Many more questions to ask. We do like to keep the show as interactive as possible and really value your opinion. Here is what you sent us this week.
This week we asked, what lesson do we derive from the Holy Quran about modern life? Hussein from Jordan said, the guidance of the way of life that we need to lead in these modern times, how to deal with modern life challenges, are all contained in the Quran. Stephen from the USA said, Quran is a book of miracle, which contains all sorts of information. The scientific discoveries that are being bragged about today have been mentioned in the Holy Book for centuries. And Isa from Algeria said, we learn from the Holy Quran about Allah's existence. Quran tells us so much about the universe and points to us the fact that a marvelous creation of the modern world cannot exist without a creator.
Quran is a book that was given us by Allah 1,400 years ago, but till today it's still up to date in every single point of our life. It teaches us to be kind to mankind and to be useful for the people and to be the best of humankind, because the Prophet ﷺ taught us so.
From everything, there's so much. The principles behind almost every verse are those about community, about caring about each other, that there's a duty to God, and that duty to God is fulfilled through duty to others.
Can you think of any book that was written in the times of the Prophet and that is applicable up to now and will be applicable in the modern era?
That's all the comments we have for this week. If you'd like to have your views featured in the show, be sure to follow us on Facebook or join us on Twitter. Now you can send your own videos with your comments and even your questions to islamandlife@presstv.com.
I want to come back, Tariq, to this idea of the scientific questions mentioned in this clip and the clip earlier. Why are the scientific facts mentioned in the Quran so important? They've been said over and over again.
Yes, I think it's an important question for two reasons. The first one is, as Muslims believe that these are the very words of God, nothing in the one who created the universe could be against any scientific facts. So we'll find nothing in the Quran which is against the scientific facts. And this is what, up to now, no one can find in the Quran and say, oh, this is against what science has proven so far. So I think that what is important is really to look at many of the things that are said. In fact, all some of the claims by scientists over time, they were saying things that the Quran is not going in that direction. So you can see here that it's open, and still nothing in the Quran is against scientific facts. The second thing, which is problematic with some Muslims, is that they look at the scientific discoveries now and say, oh, everything is in the Quran. So this is not true. The Quran is not a scientific book. It's a book about moral guidance. First, nothing in the book against science, but not every scientific discovery will find a place in the Quran. Why? Because the truth of today are what could be the error of tomorrow. So science is always evolving, and some are running, going very fast, say, oh, what we have now, what we just discovered is already in the Quran. No. Be very cautious with this, because this is something which is a problem. And I would say the Quran doesn't need to be proven through scientific discoveries. Just this connection is something which is a very old mindset that we find. We find this in Christianity, by the way, then when people were trying to prove the truthfulness of the Bible by saying, oh, everything is already there. I think we have to be very cautious with this. This is not the right way to deal with the Quran, because the Quran is not to be proven by the scientific side, even though nothing is against. It's going to be proven by the very essence of the message itself, in spiritual terms and in moral terms.
What you say in itself is quite interesting, because when you say that nothing in the Quran is against scientific facts, you yourself have said that it could be the error of tomorrow. So surely there must be things in there which are problematic as far as science is concerned. Even now, even today, right now, there'll be issues with some of the things. I can't think of an example, but there must be. So can we truly say that there is nothing in the Quran that is against scientific facts? Because it could be the error of tomorrow.
Yeah, but that's exactly the point. If, for example, people are telling you about, for example, the theory of evolution, for example, that's a good example. So we don't have a problem with evolution in itself. In the two main traditions, in the Shia tradition and the Sunni tradition, evolution could be a fact. الذي خلق وصوره. So khalaqa, it's the creation, and sawarahu, it's gave him or gave it its form, meaning that there is a difference between creating and giving a form, that the form could take time. So we don't have a problem with evolution. Now, what some are saying as scientific hypothesis is disprove that we are coming from the origin of human being, its apps, and this is proven. Say, okay, be careful here. We might agree on the fact, and we are suspending our judgment because we don't think that there is this link between human beings and the whole creation. There is something specific in our understanding. So science could tell you today, no, it's proven. And by the way, many are, for example, taking the Darwinian theory by saying this is science. No, it's a hypothesis still. So I would say don't jump too quickly to a conclusion. Yes, evolution is a fact. Now, how it started, what is the final discovery about how this connection is going to be made. As Muslims, we don't jump into this conclusion by trying to show that everything is in the Quran or denying science by saying, oh, here the Quran is against science. No, the Quran here is questioning the scientific hypothesis. This is the way we have to put it. So we have to be cautious in both ways, not to go too quickly to try to prove the scientific discoveries of today, or to accept hypotheses as scientific. This is what also scientists are telling us. No, these are hypotheses. We have to be cautious with this.
And with this idea, the creationism being taught within science, or how is that going to be dealt with, or how should that be dealt with? Because what you're presenting is a nuanced kind of understanding of evolution and how it should be presented, but that's not the classic fight between religious and scientific and the scientific community.
Yes, you are completely right, and I think that the classic fight is an ideological construction. Is either you are creationist, either you are evolutionist. And I think no, there is a way in between, which a creationist for me, it's not the answer. It's not the answer by saying, and I saw some of the people who are Muslim creationists, in the way they are playing with some of the verses is problematic by trying to say, oh, it was, even not understanding that il-yawm, there are 6 days, or no, yawm in Arabic means a cycle. It could be much more than this. And even in the Quran, 1 day in God's sight, it's 1,000 years for us. So be careful with this and don't try to draw some conclusions that could be problematic. So I would say creationism is problematic, and I wouldn't go that way. And the scientific hypothesis that we have on evolution should still be questioned, and we don't have a final word.
This point that you mentioned about Yom and the fact that it's 1 day or 1,000 years, or it could be, is that is there an issue of interpretation of that language, or is it a case of, why does that problem occur?
It's two things. The first, it has to do with interpretation and the understanding of the semantic and the grammar of a language. And this is why what you said at the beginning is very important. Sometimes it's science that is helping us to reassess our interpretation and say, oh, what does it mean exactly? What is the very meaning of this word? And you come to the etymology, and the etymology or the grammar or the semantic is telling you, oh, it's wider than what we thought. In fact, you read the words in the light of your current knowledge. The more you have knowledge, the more even the grammar of the text or the semantic of the text is opening. So in many things, when you have in the Quran something questioning the creation of God, and God is saying in the Quran, بَلَا قَادِرِينَ عَلَى أَن نُسَوِّيَ بَنَانَهُ. We are even able not only to create you, to recreate you, but we are able to create this, your finger. For the Muslims at the time of the revelation, it was just the finger. Now what do we know? That the fingerprints are something which is completely specific. This is what makes you an individual. So you get the understanding that the more knowledge you have, a better understanding of the book. So it's a two-way process. But we should avoid reducing the text to a scientific book and reducing science to the current discoveries, because this is still open for change and new understanding and new discoveries.
I want to stereotype slightly and say that science doesn't actually, within the Western context, doesn't like religion, and religion doesn't like science, and there is this problem going on that you would have religion being either tolerated or compartmentalized by the scientists, and this is driven, or it seems to be driven, by secularization, by atheism. Why is religion seen as such a threat?
I would be very specific here, and that Muslims should understand something which is very specific to the Western history, and especially the relationship between the Catholic Church and scientists. In fact, the very interpretation of the Bible was the scientific reference. Anything that was coming from science, what was challenging this interpretation, was rejected. And we know this with Galileo and what happened in this. So there were a conflict of truth. This is scientific truth versus religious truth. And at the end, religion wanted to control anything which was coming from science, to the point that a very bright French philosopher, Blaise Pascal, was saying we have to write against those who are pushing too far science. Why? Because they were scared that through this process it would maybe question the very essence of faith. While in Islam, our history is exactly the opposite. Is in the name of your faith, siru fil ard, go and look for the truth and study the world. So it's completely different. In fact, more knowledge to a deeper faith, it's not the same as more knowledge questioning and putting faith at risk. But it comes to a point very quickly in this discussion that we as Muslims, we have to be very clear. Do we want faith to control, or do we want faith to direct? And questioning the goals of knowledge, not controlling the knowledge itself. So religion should not control knowledge, but direct knowledge towards the right and the good ends and goals.
Very interesting answer. The Quranic expressions on scientific issues have not to date been proven incorrect. So say those that seek the validity of the Quranic text via the angle of science. The problem with this approach is that the theories of science are constantly changing, and on occasions contradicting those theories that have come before. Surely this book of Revelation is above the unidimensional compartmentalization and has breadth and depth that will forever be a book to draw from. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. I would like to thank Professor Tariq Ramadan for joining us, and I thank you all for watching. Until next time, goodbye.